Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lloyd and I source cars for people on a professional basis. Although most of the cars I source are between £1,000 and £5,000, very often I've been asked to show something a little bit cheaper on the channel, and so I came up with No Budget Reviews, the series where we look at cars that you can buy in good condition with an MOT for under £1,000 and you can enjoy driving. We don't film this in an expensive manner, we don't use separate microphones, we don't use dual head tripods, we don't even use a DSLR, but we do have a lot of fun.
Two years ago, viewers, I did a review of Volvo 940 Estate. It was a celebration auto, a very late one. This is a much earlier one. It's a 2-litre SE auto. It's actually the least powerful engine that you could get with a 940 in this country. This car dates from early 1993. So it is a bit different from the other two we've had. The second one we had was also a celebration, but a manual. The colour is midnight blue. This is a colour that was actually on my mother's 240 that she had from 1990 to 2001. So I'm very familiar with this colour on Volvos. Also, we've got these little aftermarket reflective strips you could put into bumpers. That's something a lot of owners did back in the day, actually. My mother's car had those. Now, technically, those should be white and the rear one should be red. But, you know, we won't be too concerned about that. 940s are a little bit more expensive than they were 2 years ago. You can still buy a 940 Estate for No Budget Reviews money. I actually found one last night for that sort of money, but that car had done 250,000 miles and was a write-off. So yeah, you can get them, but we're moving into a situation now with these cars where actually the prices are going up. A lot of them are now in the sort of £2,000 to £3,000 bracket, but this is No Budget Reviews and we enjoy the cheaper cars, so we'll go with this one. As you see, we've got a lot of the original features the car would have had. We've got the high-level brake lights still on here, we've got the SIPS sticker there. Massive boot on these, like the 960. So there we go. Struts aren't best on this, but they're okay. So I've had to use a little bit of help to get that up. So yes, you can actually see that Volvo thought very carefully about the sort of people who'd be having these, and put little covers when you fold those seats down. Then you know, they are covered up and you can slide things straight through. It's a completely flat floor. This is an aftermarket sort of cover for the sill. That's probably a sensible idea actually, because I imagine loads of those would have got damaged back in the day. This car was available with 7 seats. This car doesn't actually have them. It's a bit of a hassle to put them in and out, and it means that accessing the spare is a bit more difficult than it would be. It's sort of under there. There we go, looking in very nice condition. And there's how to use the jack and all that sort of stuff, very useful. Little compartments in here as well for putting things in if you want to. And taking those off to change the bulbs in the back is actually really, really easy as well. So yeah, about 900 litre boot, big and square. You can see why antique dealers absolutely loved these cars back in the day. 940 is actually a very heavily facelifted 740. Externally, the facelifted 740s that came out in late 89, they look really similar to 940s, and actually the 740 and the 940 were sold alongside each other for 2 years until 1992. In 93 they discontinued the 240, was also on sale at the same time as these, and the 850 Estate came out. So they had lots of options, shall we say. But yeah, the 960 and then later the V90 ran all the way through until about, I think, 98, 99 most ran through. These were discontinued in about February 98, but they were on sale in this country until about June 1998. One thing I find about these 940s is that they don't have quite as much room in the back as you'd think for a car this size. 240 is the same, it's actually even worse, but it's still quite big. We've got the sort of safety type interior door handle there, which is inherited from the 740. This car's actually had some extra wood put in it. The SE model that this is wouldn't have actually had this wood originally. Oh yes, good old windy windows in the back, and a fabric interior. The very early 940s would have had a different type of fabric interior from this. And actually the headlining was just pretty good. We've got a sunroof, got no air conditioning in this car, though that was definitely available. And later on, yes, we'll have a look at that amazing seatbelt reminder warning light, which is the sound of my childhood. So yeah, very old-fashioned type interior, I suppose, by 1993 when this car was made. But people just kept buying these cars. They're still selling the 240s in quite large numbers, even right up to the end. So, you know, people just love them. And this is the booster cushion for a child. I don't know if that's a very good idea to put a child in there, actually, these days. Probably not great, but it was something that was very, very much seen as an innovation back in the day. See if I can do this with one hand. There we go, and a knee. So yeah, you can actually put that in there. A lot of cars obviously still just had lap belts in the middle. I mean, my 2003 Rover 45 V6, I think that's still got a little lap belt. Can't remember now. You could also get a very kind of more integrated stereo than this one. Obviously, this car's 30 years old, and so having a newer stereo in it's probably a good idea if you want to do things like making calls whilst you're driving or plugging your music in, which you can do with that system. So we've got these seat back pockets. They're a little bit sort of droopy, but you know, if you have a car that's this old, this is still something you expect, isn't it, really? One thing I'm surprised about is, one, that there's no mat pockets on the rear doors. There's none at all. And if you look at the front ones, they're really quite restricted. I'm surprised how small they actually are. But you do have these enormous things by the side of each seat, so that sort of makes up for it. I'm afraid, viewers, that this glove box is probably not going to take my secret mission documents. See if I do one hand. There we go. I don't think it is. No. It's a shame. There's little outlines for cups there, but I wouldn't trust that to sort of hold a cup when you go around the corner. But it's still just, it's very sort of classic Volvo, this. There's a certain sort of indefinable quality about these cars, and this has it in spades. Rear-wheel drive, big sort of square design, safety bumpers, as you can see. This car's had a new fuel flap actually, and somebody probably hit this rear corner at some stage. It's why the paint's all faded, and you know there's a little bit of rust coming through. But the rest of the car, the paint's actually quite good really for the age. They don't tend to rust too badly, these, the sort of age of the car. I mean, most things of this age would have disintegrated long since, and yeah, they do rust. I'll show you one of the most common rust areas in a little bit, but they're actually not too bad. That's why a lot of people still like these. I mean, insurance on these is actually surprisingly cheap. Kale, who owns this car, it's one of his first cars, and the insurance is quite reasonable, particularly because this is the 2 litre. And I know another chap who has a 740, a late 740 as well, and he's maybe sort of 21, 22. So if you want a classic Volvo, and you know you are towards the beginning of your driving career, it's not that bad an idea. I don't know what's going on with these seatbelt buckles. It's really weird. They still work. You can still get out, but yeah, that is a bit of a problem. So quite low mileage for one of these, 142,000 miles, which is absolutely nothing for a red block engine Volvo. That's nothing. I mean, you know, 200,000, 300,000 is really common. If you are thinking of buying one of these and you see it's done over 200,000 miles, I wouldn't be too concerned about that, really. So we got the 3-speed auto here. I think it's got overdrive. Later cars did have a different gearbox for the auto, and there were 3 different manuals as well. Heated seats, of course, and heated mirrors, which is very nice. As I said before, this wood is not actually original to the car, but it's off a later higher spec model. Sometimes the instrument cluster can go a bit funny. You end up with speedo not working and things like that, but you know, it's not too bad. See if you've got, it's quite a bad design, you can't really get into this silly ashtray very well when you've got the car in park. You've got a little adjuster for the seat height there, little compartment there for, well, I suppose it would be taped, wouldn't it, in 1993. A manual sunroof that I'm not going to open, viewers. It's raining and this car is, well, it's 30 years old, so I think we'll leave that alone. Classic Volvo wiper stalk and indicator stalk, light switches there, that's for the fog lamps, and the hazard light switch is just on there. Right, let's open the bonnet and take a look at the engine. So here we have the famous Volvo red block engine. It was actually introduced, I think, with the 240 in the mid-70s. And this was the last car that red block was used in. It's an overhead cam engine, and as you can see, it's longitudinally mounted in this car. It was also used in the 360, so you know, that's a much smaller car than one of these. This instance, it's the B200F is the code for this particular engine, and it generates about 111 horsepower. You can see here we've got the battery tray. That is actually the most common area for rust on a 940. So obviously when you're looking at one, just have a look at that. Cam belt's actually really easy to do on this. You can, that is the cam belt cover there. It's really easy. You can see, particularly if this is the 2 litre, it's very easy to work on. ABS pump is just there. Power steering fluid is here. Look at all this space. There's so much space. Cross members just down there. Now the 960s, generally, most of them had the 2.5 or 3 litre 6-cylinder white block engine, Volvo modular engine, which is like one generation on from this. And particularly the facelifted ones that came out in about 1994, they are very, very different cars from the 940. They've got a completely different suspension at the back. Engines are totally different, and the interior is very different from these. But they kept these going as well because people just loved them and just wanted to hold on to the kind of traditional Volvo virtues, which sort of continued in the modern models as well. Right, I think it's time to go for a drive, viewers. Right, viewers, a little bit of a damp and miserable day, but never mind. We're driving a 940 estate, so it can't be too bad. The lowest powered engine that was available in this country, the B200F, like in this car, generated 111 horsepower. I'm told that 0 to 60 in this car is just under 14 seconds, and I can well believe it, not breaking any speed records today. There was also a 2 litre turbo version of this engine, which generated 155 horsepower. Those were both, I think, 8-valve engines. When we get onto the 2.3s, there were 2 8-valve versions of those as well. One was the non-turbo that had 131 horsepower. There was actually a 16-valve version of the normally aspirated 2.3 as well, which generated 155, the same as the 2 litre turbos are in. Then there were 2 power outputs for the 8-valve turbo, 165 and 190 horsepower. Confusingly, the car was badged both as like a 940 turbo as a trim level, and also like GLE turbo. The most common engines these days that you'll find though are the 2 really late engines that appeared in this car. The low pressure turbo that was in both the celebration models that you would have seen on the channel before, 135 horsepower, and then there was a high pressure turbo, 170 horsepower. There are also some diesels available, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and all kinds of other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. What we do talk about is actually the torque from this engine. It's remarkably easy just to sort of make moderate progress, particularly with this automatic gearbox. The 3 manuals available were a normal 5-speed manual with the
reverse up to the left and engaged by the collar. There was also an overdrive 4-speed gearbox, which was on things like the 2-litre Wentworth model, which is very, very unusual. I don't know if many cars from the 90s that have a manual overdrive like that. The later gearbox in this car, which would have been in the 940 celebration we did last year, had reversed to the right down there. That's a perfectly nice gearbox. The earlier ones at the 5-speed do sort of wear sometimes. The M90, I think, is the name of the later gearbox. That's quite nice. And like I said before, the later automatics have a different gearbox from this one as well. So we're just on the way back. Just turn around. The turning circle's quite good. It's not as good as a 960. That basically need a better turning circle than these do. But it's not too bad. Steering in these is really light. All 940s have got power steering. You could get a saloon version as well. They tend to be a lot rarer because people bought Volvos for the estates very much. But yeah, they're different from the 740s in the sense that the boot line is very, very different. They look a lot more modern. Whether you like the look of a 740 or the 940, it's very much up to personal taste. I think the 960 looked the best of all. They had a far more comprehensive facelift than these ever did. These just amounted to, you know, changing bits of trim and changing the colour of the indicators, the grille, and also the rear lights. That's the sort of thing that they did. So not huge changes, but there didn't need to be huge changes, to be honest, because people bought these for the kind of traditional image of the car, the space inside the car, and the comfort. And the comfort is extraordinary. It's really, really good. I was sort of quite tempted by one of these myself. I was sort of quite tempted to get something like this. I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I won't, I don't know. Because there's so much tradition in my family, having had that 240 for all those years. But they are quite big. I mean, you can see pretty well that the visibility is amazingly good in this car. It doesn't handle like a sports car. It really doesn't. It sort of rolls around the corners. Steering's light, but it's not the most responsive steering. It's a bit on the vague side. And you don't buy a 940 for precise handling. You don't buy a 940 for the sporty suspension. You buy it because you want comfort and you want space. And actually, these cars tend to be very reliable. I'll put a link in the description below to a page on the Volvo Owners Club, of which I'm a member, site, which gives a very comprehensive list of things to look for in a 940, far more than I would be able to put in this video. But yes, it's very pleasant. I've enjoyed myself very much. Lloyd Consulting stickers, t-shirts and mugs are available by clicking the link to the Google form in the video description below. So viewers, should you buy a Volvo 940 estate with your hard-earned budget up to £1,000? Well, these days you're not likely to find too many 940s with that kind of money anymore. You're best off probably spending, I'd say, £2,000 to £3,000 to get one that's in better condition and probably hasn't been written off and things like that. There were various trim levels available for the 940 during the production, which lasted from 1990 to early 1998. The S and the L were more towards the bottom. The SE is very strange. At the beginning, the SE was quite a high-spec car, but as it went on, it kind of got supplanted by, nicer models like the sort of CD and the GLE and things like that. The turbo model with no other trim is quite nice. The Wentworth is based on the SE, but just a little bit nicer trimmed. The Celebration, Tourslander and the Classic came towards the end of production. The Tourslander was a little bit less specified than the Celebration, which was sort of all the options thrown at them. There were also some very strange special editions called the Sports Edition, the Highlander, and just for Special Edition. The GL was kind of the mainstay when the car was launched, as it was for many Volvos in the 1990s. The cars were built in Sweden. This one's built in Sweden, Belgium as well, Canada, Indonesia and Thailand. I can't imagine there's huge demand for 940s in Indonesia and Thailand, but there we go. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching this episode of No Budget Reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more inexpensive motoring.